Hi everyone, it's Lolita and this is our demo video, part 2 for the color matching and watercolor technique exercise. I hope you enjoy and learn something. Continuing on with the wet into wet, now that this is nice and dry, what I'm going to do first here is I'm going to take the wet, of course it's wet, water. I'm going to take the water and just give it a nice pass over the wet surface. It's not going to reactivate this paint too much because it's nice and dry. So I'm taking just clean water and wetting the entire surface. You can do this with your large round brush, or you could even do it with your flat brush. So I'm just brushing that over the entire surface of the water, and I'm going to move it around the entire surface of the paper. I'm just going to move it around to make sure and look at it, so that way I make sure I actually do have the entire surface nice and wet, that there's a good gloss of water over that entire paper. Not so much that it's running too far, but enough that it's is going to help move that next layer of paint along. And so we're going to do one more wash in this area, and this is going to be the one color wash, where we take that same color, and after we have that surface nice and the water is evenly distributed but not where it's pulled up in any place, but and just really nice and distributed evenly over that surface. So I've got that happening now, and I'm just going to move this palette back over and reactivate this little pile of paint I've got here. And this is what I had mixed up before for this area. And I'm going to do the same thing that I had done before, where I start at the top of my paper. I think I'm going to tilt it just a little to help gravity influence the movement of the pigment over the surface. I'm going to load my brush just a little more because I want a little more pigment on the surface of my paper than I was getting. And load that into there one more time. And just move that paint back and forth till I get a really nice gradated wash, and it's gradated by virtue of the wet into wet technique, where I've got a nice lovely wash going across my paper. I'm going to move that just a little more. I'm just moving that pigment, allowing it to just slightly stain the paper. Now I'm going to do the next one. While that one dries, I'm going to do the same thing with this wet into wet rectangle, and I'm going to pass clear water over that entire surface. And because it's nice and dry, the paint has already soaked into the surface of the water, and even though it will reactivate, the surface is already painted and it's fairly much done its job, and the paint being it. So the paint has fairly much done its job of staining the surface of the paper, and it's not going to get too reactivated. And again, I'm going to look at this to ensure that I've got a nice wet surface. The entire rectangle, the entire surface of the rectangle is wet, so that paint will move down the surface of the paper by virtue of it being the surface being wet. So I'm going to do the same thing here, just reactivate all of these colors, and I may change the degree to what I decide I'm going to saturate my surface. So I decided I'm going to, because I'm just here, there's no particular reason other than that, just because I'm being playful, I'm going to take this purple and really load it up in this corner over here and just continue my multi-colored gradient wash. Just really get this loaded up nice and saturated here in this corner. And allow it to move over. Because I started in this corner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow gravity to work with me and just allow this to move across the surface of the paper. Get it really nice and diffused, and take that clean edged brush and just allow that nature of the wet media to work. So I can pick this up if I don't want that to move through, but I think I'm going to allow it to move through this area as well. I got a little saturated over here, so I'm picking some of that up just with a little bit of a cleanness in my brush. Get a little wet over there as well. So I'm going to go into this yellow area and intensify the yellow down and up, I said up down, but I really mean up in this corner, and really give myself a nice saturated yellow up in that corner, and do a little more saturation with the blue on this side, just because we're not doing any kind of trying to create an image. I'm going to allow those to diffuse into each other. I'm just going to go through here and move that edge to allow it to diffuse into that lower area. I'm going to go in here with a little bit more orange, and I decided I want it to be a little more bright than what's in my palette. So I'm just going to take a little bit area over here and really drop this orange in on this side and brighten that area in through there, again for no particular reason except we're just creating abstract images. You can create one that's not abstract if you want. And I'm going to load a little bit more yellow down into this corner and allow that yellow to really mix in nicely with that orange. And then I've got this just random gradient. I'm going to let that dry. Our paper is nice and dry, so I'm just going to play with making a little abstract-like image down here. And I'm going to use the dark that's up here and allow it to counterbalance with this lightness down here. And I'm going to put just a flowing line down through here. And I'm going to paint all of this in just to have a counterbalance to the dark, or rather a contrast to the dark, make this darkness a counterbalance to that light wash area we've put back there and the first passages that we did with our wet into wet. And with here we're just going wet into dry and painting on top of the surface that we already created with the wet into wet technique. And I'm just brushing this over to make a little random darkness down in the corner of this particular rectangle. And this is just so you can see what you can expand this to different opportunities, and just letting you understand how you can create images or how you can apply paint over another surface that you've already painted. So I'm going to go in with this little turquoise here also. And I'm just going to put a little dark circle here, almost indicating a moon or anything that your mind wants to assign to it. So it doesn't have to be a moon. I am just creating that little circle in there. And since I've already got my brush wet with this particular color, this again is just no image whatsoever, and I'm going to go into this other area and I'm just going to paint little shapes in and over the paint that I've laid down previously with a wet into wet. And we can see what layering effects can happen with layering paint over an area we've already painted, and just playing around and taking that information in and seeing how we can use that to create images later that we may want to create, or just decide how exactly we want to use this information to make the images that we want to create later. Just playing with layering over other areas that are underneath, just to see what happens and to see how I can apply this to my paintings in the future. Take advantage of that paint and take that right up to the edge. And I think I liked that circle over here so much that I'm just going to put another circle in through this area, playing with the line structure a little in here. So I think I'm going to put a dark circle in this area as well. It can represent a moon, or it doesn't have to. This one has definitely stayed in the realm of complete abstracts. I'm going to take a little bit of purple paint and move it in through this area just to fortify the value in there for no reason, just playing and seeing what effects I can get. Seeing how layering dark over light. And again, I might use these in paintings later, and perhaps just take in this information and use it in subsequent paintings. All right, I'm just having fun, like I said. I am going to go back in, and this is relatively damp, so I'm just going to take some of this dark that I just happen to have over here in this area of my palette, and I'm just going to lay some of that down in this corner. Again, just the idea of painting layers over other layers. Painting one dark over another dark. And just having fun with the idea of painting. I'll take more of this and layer it down here all the way in front. I'm looking at this as sort of landscapey, so that's why I called it the front. I think what I'd like to do is intensify a little bit of color in through here. And just take some paint straight out of one of my wells and apply it into here. Play a little bit of wet into wet while I'm playing with wet into dry. And allow those just to meld and diffuse nicely into each other. And I think that's all the playing that I'm going to do for now, except I think I want to change my mind real quick and put a real nice little darkness down here in this area of the rectangle, just because I felt it calling, asking me to put something a little darker in this painting. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to peel back some of these paints, these tape areas down here. If you want to go back in and fortify any of the values in your dry into dry, or wet into dry rather, exercises that you did, you can. I do have some paint mixed up here, just basic colors. You can go back in and play with these too. And if you want to do any layering of paint on top of the washes you placed down before, this is just a good experiment, a good time to play around with those, and then take those ideas and see how you could make them possibly into images that you want to create for the projects that we have upcoming. I'm just going to intensify these colors, charge them a little more with yellow, make them all a little more highly charged with yellow by taking my straight yellow and just putting it in through that area to charge that with a little more yellow. And then I think what I want to do here is just intensify the value of this corner and go in with a little bit of this deep paint that I've created and paint that corner in a lot darker and just diffuse that out a little, again with something of a wet into wet technique. And then I think what I will do is I think I'm going to take my little brush and I'm going to just reactivate this, and this is almost just straight blue, and I think I want to write my name in here in blue. So I'm just going to try to access this and I'll put it down this direction just because this is where I can access it and it's not wet. So I'm just going to write my name over this this wash of a background that we did the wet into dry. And again, this is just playing around with the idea of not necessarily making an image. Okay, and that's all I'm going to do with this exercise for now. I will come back and finish this video. I'm not going to paint in my other seven colors. Remember that what I want you guys to do is you have to do all 7 color with color matching, and this one, just have fun with this. Whichever technique you found that you want to explore a little bit more, the wet into wet or the wet into dry, or if you want to paint just an image in there, have fun with this one, but make sure you paint it in and I will see you in the next video.